from my PhD. The goal of it was to create a qualitative design ideation tool to guide businesses towards better circular business models. It was developed as part of the Circular X ERC, European Research Council funded research project at Maastricht University, where the goal was to advance the understanding on circular business models, the emergence of environmental impacts, and to create tools to support the development of these business models. To just give a very brief background, because I do not know what the background of the audience is in this webinar. So in the last few years, we've seen a growing interest in experimentation with circular business models within small, medium, and large companies for various reasons, whether it be legislation or need. And essentially, circular business models are strategies that are intended to slow, close, narrow, or regenerate resource flows and loops to move us away from unsustainable linear business models. But while circular business models might be well-intentioned, we found that environmental impacts were rarely accounted for in the early stage. So I had this question. So there's a lot of tools in practice, the LCA, the lifecycle analysis, mass flow analysis, but what do companies actually use to measure impact when they're in that early stage, and how do they track impact when they business idea or change the product or the materials in the product? So first, I had this question: how do companies measure environmental impact? This was the first paper of my PhD, where I asked 68 professionals from different sectors, small, medium, and large companies from different countries. How do they measure impact and what tools do they use? And I found that most struggle to measure environmental impact in that early stage due to very high uncertainty, especially when the design of the product or the service is changing as the business model idea or the product innovation is sort of reaching its final stages. Often companies don't have the resources or time to do a comprehensive assessment like the LCA or the mass flow analysis, so they end up using rules of thumb. And that was the most used type of method, and these are essentially internal guidelines regarding circular design, internal KPIs, and they can be accurate sometimes, but they can also sometimes not be accurate. And this can lead to lock-in of environmental impact in that design phase. We also know that circular solutions are not inherently better for the environment unless they're specifically designed to be so, because rebound effects can undermine the environmental impact reduction potential. These are essentially unintended consequences that undermine the impact that a team might want to have or a company might want to have. Simply, it's when we become more efficient, for example, through circularity, the problem can be that we create more of a product, and then that just raises the environmental impact overall. And some recent studies have estimated that rebound effects can sometimes undercut up to 60% of the projected environmental impact reduction potential. So my next question was, how can rebound effects be designed out of circular business models? What is necessary? So I used the insights from the first paper, where I found that these rules of thumbs are what are used in the design phase. So I thought it would be a good idea to design a qualitative tool that can be used in quick, iterative ways. And that was the Circular Rebound Tool. It is based around the principles of lifecycle thinking, the zero waste hierarchy, and addressing rebound effects. I developed it through the design science research method, through iterative testing. And this essentially means that the tool itself was the object of the research, and it was developed with practitioners who would use it, and it continually improved through those 15 workshops. It is available open access on Miro. So I'm just going to dive into what the tool is. It's very briefly a 4-step tool that was that intends to guide product and business model designers or teams that are in that experimentation phase to think critically about the true environmental impact of their proposed business model. The attempt was to strike a balance between the content and depth versus usability and simplicity to make it accessible for teams who do not know much about sustainability and circularity at all. So this is what it looks like in Miro. Usually there's a tutorial, an example case to lead you into the tool if you were to use it as a team. It's supposed to be self-directed and not need a researcher to be or facilitator to be present. So I'm going to go through the steps very bit by bit. So first, the team is prompted to describe the challenge in step 1. What problem is it that they want to solve, and do some goal setting. And then they go on to step 2, where they are prompted to choose a strategy that fits the challenge that they want to solve. And these are basically arranged according to the 9R framework from Kircher et al., which is the zero waste hierarchy. Just to make it simple, there are circular strategies such as, I'll go in depth into it a little more and show a zoomed in version, but it's strategies such as remanufacture, refurbish, repair, and they're ranked from what could have potentially the lowest impact and what could have the highest impact. So for example, going towards recycling, you often lose a lot of value versus if you just repair and extend the lifetime of a product. So that's how these are arranged. Then they're prompted to pick one of these strategy cards that meet their challenge. This is what the cards look like. A snapshot of one of them is Regenerate, which I've added to the top end of the higher impact end of the spectrum. The cards give insight on what is this intervention, the circular resource strategy, what are some capacity requirements that they might need to implement it, an example of a company, and also more examples that do this strategy, and also rebound effects card, which give the potential rebound effects of the strategy and some potential rebound prevention techniques. The user is then supposed to take these cards and move them physically to this step 3, which is this lifecycle map. And there are prompts to prompt them to use post-its to think along the entire life cycle of the product. And this sort of came from my background also. I did my bachelor's in zoology, so I'm a zoologist, and I think from an ecosystem perspective, and I wanted to bring that into circular business and business design. So then they go through this life cycle map and they think about their problems, and then they look at also through the prompts here, look at the rebound effects. They're prompted to think about how can you prevent them already in this stage, what can you foresee, and what are potential solutions. And then in the final stage, it's just a bit of goal setting or agenda setting to prompt again the user to set 3 goals of what needs to be done next and how will it be achieved. So this could, from a company perspective, could simply be, oh, I need to talk to the legal team, or I need to talk to the sustainability team, and what questions do I need to ask them, or there needs to be more integration between 2 teams. So yeah, and then in each step there's also an indicator of how much time you should spend and on that step. And then I think usually it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to do 1 cycle, and the goal was to do repeated cycles. Yeah, so that is the Circular Rebound Tool. And my takeaways here are The first research paper gave a detailed wish list of what practitioners want in an ideal measurement tool, which we used to then develop the Circular Rebound Tool. The first paper also gave ideas about what the barriers are to impact measurement in the early design phase. And yeah, that's how we developed this tool. That's my very short presentation. It's a lot shorter than 20 minutes, I realize now. But I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. I think maybe like one note, I have some, so I cannot access the Miro board. And when I go, so the link that Kai has just sent is somehow not accessible. And when I Google it, I cannot find it.
I'll try again, and I work from the Circular X site now, because it's possible that it's a copy I made. I don't know. I'll cross-check.
Oh, yeah, I can also share it in the chat.
Thank you. Does anyone have a question?
Well, personally, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much, Ankita. That was absolutely fascinating. I've been aware of your tool for quite a while. I have my fingers burning to try it out with the group, and I'm incredibly inspired by learning that you're also a zoologist. We have people from the Natural Systems Working Group here. We take our cue from nature, and I'm really interested if you have maybe a second to further develop how this sort of impacted this ecosystem thinking, and from your background impacted your work there. Maybe one or two more details around that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it really gave me this, it sort of maybe broke the illusion that I had around circular business models being good. It really gave me this idea of what rebound effects are and where we need to go. And what I did then was to bring this first idea of regeneration more into what I was working on, and I worked more on regenerative business models. I have a few bonus slides. I mean, it's part of my thesis, but it wasn't supposed to be part of this presentation, and I can just show you. And yeah, we did this work on discovering what regenerative business models are and what that looks like, and taking this more systems perspective and looking at what does it mean to have a net positive impact and not just stop at net zero. And this was developed also through focus groups with companies and consultants, but also with indigenous communities in India, and also I think it was Costa Rica. No, it was Ecuador, sorry. And so that was super interesting. And then I took this one step further to develop a database of regenerative business cases. I think there's 84 cases in the database. I don't know if, oh, let me see if, yeah, so this is an example. So it has examples of companies using regeneration, how they do it, different kinds of impact that they have. It's, again, publicly available, open access. I can put it in the chat. But yeah, that's how it informed my work in the end. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe a question about the 9 cards you used in the tool. I saw in this card there were sort of the main risk and the main method to overcome the risk. And where does this information come from? Did you find it in the bibliography, or did you build it by some thinking? Or
You mean the content of the cards?
yes, the one, for instance, the in one card you show the regenerate card with the potential rebound effect and the rebound prevention techniques.
Yeah. So this was initially based on a short literature review, and I was also aware that at the time it was just out of scope to do a systematic literature review. I did not have any resource at the time. There have been reviews since then, meta-analysis, which have looked at rebound effects of specific circular strategies. But at the time, there wasn't one. So this was based on, the papers we could find, and that informed the study. I also worked on, it's a study that's under review now, which took this one step further and did like a broader systematic literature review of rebound effects of different circular business models and mitigation strategies. But that's under review.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very nice introduction and presentation of the tool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? So I definitely have many questions. I would leave them to the open Q&A at the end, if that's okay for you. So that's now we can follow up with the Laetitia's presentation.
Sure.
Cool. Thank you very much. Laetitia, the floor is yours.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Ankita, for the presentation. It was super interesting. I'm going to try to share my screen and keep my video, and we'll see if it works because I'm not sure about my network currently, but we'll try. So, up. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, perfect. So, hi everyone again, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to share with you some of the work that I've been doing during my thesis, which was entitled Systemic and Concrete Methods and Tools to Address Environmental Complexity and Rebound Effects within a Design or Decision-Making Process. So to briefly introduce myself, I have first studied engineering and building architecture before studying digital design and working 5 years as a UX designer. And after which I decided to undertake a thesis that I defended last December. And since then, I've worked as a freelance researcher using the tools that I developed during my thesis on new case studies. And in a few weeks, I will start a postdoc position about IPCC scenarios. So first of all, the motivations behind this thesis, I think it's not going to surprise anyone here. So the environmental and climate situation that is catastrophic, with 6 out of 9 of the planetary boundaries that have been exceeded in 2023. So urgent action is needed, but it's far from being simple because, sorry, I'm struggling with that. Okay, perfect. Because the techno-solutionist approaches used so far do not work or are not enough. For example, optimizing car engines has never reduced the overall fuel consumption. On the contrary, it has stimulated it through the mechanism of rebound effect. And the widespread use of electric cars is not a solution to all the problems due to the heavy social environmental impacts required for the batteries production. So this is a basic example of cars to illustrate what happens in all sectors. And this raises a question, faced with this complex and urgent situation, what can we do as a digital designer? Because it was from my perspective, but as a designer or as a decision maker or an engineer in general. So while making environmental decision making. So if we have a very brief look at sustainable HCI, ICT, and SE, so the research fields that are concerned with the impact of digital technologies, researchers have been calling for a systemic approach to sustainability for almost 10 years now. So the idea is to imagining new ways of living, taking into account interaction between sectors, also different timescales and all the possible social environmental impacts, and not only the carbon. And unfortunately, to date, the responses to these calls have remained quite theoretical or provocative, at least in sustainable HCI. And they have not resulted in concrete actionable proposals with an impact outside the academic world. So this raises the question, could designers or engineers take a practical approach to such a huge problem without being reductive? And now to show you the role that design could play and how complex it is to achieve true sustainability through a concrete example. It was already a bit introduced by Ankita, but I'm going to use the example of Vinted, which is a platform for selling second-hand clothes. So it looks circular, but is it really? So they asked by you a consultancy firm to carry out a huge survey in 2021 with hundreds of thousands participants. And they concluded by helping their customers to buy second-hand clothes instead of new ones, Vinted could avoid more than 400 kilotons carbon equivalent in 2021. So the first question is what's behind this calculation? So it's based on a consequential approach. So the idea is to estimate the difference between the impacts of a scenario in a world where Vinted exists, so the real scenario, and a fictional scenario where Vinted would not exist. And to build this fictional scenario, they based on the results of this huge survey with questions like, if Vinted didn't exist, what would you have done? So for the buyers, would you have bought this item brand new? Would you have bought it secondhand anyway? Or would you have not bought it because it was just impulsive buying because you were just browsing the platform? And same thing for the sellers. If Vinted didn't exist, would you have sold this item anyway, or would you have given or thrown it away? So if the scenario where Vinted exists has less emission, then in this type of consequential approach, we consider that to be avoided impacts or avoided emissions. But this estimation is supposed to take into account all the possible direct and indirect effects. So here to give you some examples, there are just a few examples of all the direct and indirect effects of Vinted. So the direct impacts are those due to the parcel delivery, the digital platform, and Vinted operations. So that's what you put in the carbon footprint. And then you have the indirect effects, which are often linked to changes in behavior induced by a solution. So here Vinted. So first, the enablements that are the beneficial indirect effects. So these are, in fact, the cases where people said that if Vinted didn't exist, they would have bought this item brand new. So then Vinted has allowed to avoid impacts due to the production of these items. And then you have detrimental indirect effects, I would say, from indirect to very indirect. So to give you just a few examples, for instance, the additional impacts due to impulse buys while scrolling on the platform. So it's when people, it's 30% of the cases, while avoided impacts are 39% of the cases. So it's when people said that if Vinted didn't exist, they wouldn't have bought this item because it's just impulse buy. And some of these items are brand new, including on the platform. So this also have additional production impacts. Then you have the way people use the money they earn from sales. So 19% of the sellers, they said that if Vinted didn't exist, they would have given or thrown away the item. So in this case, Vinted has allowed them to earn money. And if they use this money to buy, for instance, fast fashion clothes or anything else that is very with high impacts, then it's additional impact. And in fact, some of the users, they use Vinted, they know that thanks to Vinted, they will be able to just buy more clothes and renew more their wardrobe, and they will be able to send these clothes for almost the same price after wearing those clothes a few times. So it's almost that when you buy on Vinted, sometimes you are just making it possible for people to buy more fast fashion clothes. And finally, you have higher order effects, which are harder to quantify, but not less important. So for example, here, the long-term decline in the social activities of charities due to the drop in donations, both in quantity and quality, because people, they no longer want to donate clothes that they can easily sell. So in the value study that I presented with all these avoided emissions, they only considered the direct impacts and the enablements, because it's the obvious and the beneficial effects. And all the detrimental indirect effects are largely not considered. And that's what in my research I call rebound effects. So I've got a broad definition of rebound effects, including all kinds of detrimental indirect effects. So this example shows how complex it is to intervene in a socio-technical system and to achieve beneficial socio-environmental impacts when it comes to, for instance, circular economy in this case. And anyway, it shows that this final figure that is given by the value report, it does not help designers or engineers or decision makers to improve the social environmental impacts. It's just a figure to communicate on, to make claims. So my research question was, how might designers be empowered with practical methods and tools to thoughtfully consider the indirect and rebound effects of their intervention throughout the design and decision-making process? So given that it's a question that is concerning human activities and social phenomena, I could not adopt a positivist approach that is used usually in let's say, engineering sciences, where we make a hypothesis and we test it in a laboratory and validate it by repetition, because social phenomena, you can't put it in the lab. So I adopted a more exploratory approach borrowed from social sciences and design. And the idea was to develop a methodology that can help designer and decision makers to better take into account rebound effects that I called systemic modeling methodology. And to design this methodology, I drew inspiration from the consequential approach that I explained about on the case of Vinted, and from systemic design, which is a new field of research at the crossroads of systems thinking and design, and which has a community that is developing many practical methods and tools to address multi-scale complex problems. So now I'm going to give you a quick overview of this methodology. So to put it simply, there are 4 main steps, and it's very inspired from group model building, if you know this methodology. So building team and defining a vision and a scope, collectively then build a qualitative representation of direct and indirect effects, including non-quantifiable ones, which allow for a first reflection on levers for action. Then collectively build a dynamic quantitative model of what can be quantified to understand the magnitude of direct and indirect effects, and to be able to compare different mitigation strategies through simulation. So, and yes, it's I took the example of Vinted, but this is more generic for any kind of intervention that would be a product or service, digital product or digital service, but any kind of product or service, and even a decision or a regulation. So first, there are several good practices, such as the principle known as requisite variety that comes from systemic design, which consists of involving diverse representative stakeholders who may have complementary views, so that they can build a more complete picture, and so that we can reduce the risk of misuse, because there are a lot of uncertainties. So if people are not very if they are not very honest, if they all align with a vision, they can be very biased. This also aims to enrich the discussion on the scenarios and the decisions to be taken about mitigation. So with regard to the qualitative representation of the situation, given that direct and indirect effects often interact, I have proposed the formalism close to causal loop diagrams, which is illustrated here using the example of Vinted. And with colleagues at Lancaster University, we have developed the Rebound archetype cards. So these cards are inspired by the Circular Rebound Tool that was presented by Ankita, but they are designed to be more generic and to guide stakeholders in considering about rebound and indirect effect of any type of intervention. So as I said, a new product or service, a new regulation or anything. So we don't start with suggesting intervention, but we start from the intervention that a given company has come up with. And at this stage, the cards can help the team to complete the indirect effects when creating this representation. So for example, the taken from cards asks the question, does your intervention involve the circulation of resources? And if so, what and from whom would they have been used without your intervention? So it's with metaphors, and it's not relying on a very rigorous taxonomy, but more with metaphors and a bunch of cards that can be sometimes a bit redundant. So if they have not thought about it already, the team can use these cards to think about the impact on charities, because they can think, oh, that's true, we have clothes that are sold with this platform. What would this clothes have been used for without our platform? And they could complete their overview of the situation. So here you can see that the more clothes are sold on the platform, the less are donated to charities, with this long-term impact on social solidarity actions. On the same representation, you can see here, for example, that the more clothes are on the platform, the more clothes are sold on the platform, the greater distance the parcels travel, and the greater additional CO2 emissions associated with the transportation. So this is a very basic idea, just to show that we can think about different levels for action from this kind of representation. So we could reduce this direct impact by reducing the average distance. So for example, by using a distance filter on the platform, but in the case of Vinted, this contradicts their business model, because they are charging for transaction with delivery. So they don't want people to meet and to do the sale from hand to hand. So this means also rethinking the business model at the same time. Here, for example, you can also see that the more clothes are sold on the platform, the more money is earned by the sellers, the more they can reinvest this money, and notably on fast fashion clothes, fueling this vicious cycle of fast fashion, with the impacts that we know on worker conditions, waste, CO2 emissions, and so on. So here, the Rebound archetype cards can also be used to provide ideas for mitigation strategies. So for example, the fishbowl card suggests to create a closed system. So in this case, we could try to reduce or delete this arrow by introducing a virtual currency that would encourage or force the sellers to spend their earnings on second-hand items from Vinted, or with partners, with associations, or any kind of low impact way of spending their money. So this is a bit caricatural, but it was just to show that this representation can help identify levers for action to limit rebound effects. And these levels may concern different levels, such as the design of the platform itself or the service, the rules of use, the business model, or even partnerships with other players and so on. But this representation does not make it possible to understand the magnitude of these effects and to compare intervention mitigation strategies. So that's why I also propose to collectively build a dynamic quantitative model of what can be quantified with a graphical interface so that it can be understood and modified by the participants, by the team, who are not experts. And to do this, I designed and developed Magnitude, which is a specific modeling tool, which is illustrated here with this video. So here it's an illustration of a consequential model based on the value study, where I have included some rebound effects that were not taken into account, such as how sellers spend the money they earn from sales. So we can see that 9% of them use the money earned from sale to buy brand new clothes. And the simulation is used to compare different intervention, different mitigation strategies based on various indicators. So in this case, carbon emissions, but also the loss of income for charities and the sales per month and so on. So in summary, the systemic modeling methodology includes good practices, a formalism for qualitative representation, a specific modeling tool, and the rebound archetypes cards to guide the participants throughout the process. And those cards can also be used on their own to run quick workshops, like half day or a whole day workshop when people don't have time for the full methodology and don't have time for quantifying the effects. So just to go a bit deeper on the cards, so yeah, they are aimed for practitioners, not academics. They are based on literature review, interviews with sustainable and systemic designers, 4 workshops to iteratively develop the process and the cards. But they are still a prototype. And they can be sometimes redundant. They can be because it's just ideation cards. So we are not aiming for a taxonomy. So there are 5 categories of cards. Sorry. And yeah, I'm going to present briefly all the cards. So the actants cards are designed to help people think about the actants, that is the people, organization, or even non-human beings who will be affected by the intervention. So for instance, in the case of Vinted, you have the direct users that can be the buyers. That can be the buyers or the sellers on the platform. And you can also have a category of other groups indirectly affected who are not users, for instance, charities. So this just to show you a few examples. Then the next category describes the indirect effects. So, for example, in the case of Vinted, the bouncing coin would be the direct economic or indirect economic rebound. So it applies to both the buyers and the sellers, because buyers, they can save money because the items are a bit more affordable. So they usually buy more items, and sellers, they earn money from sales, and they can buy, for instance, new fast fashion clothes with this money. And another example, for instance, is the fact that, as I said, charities, they receive fewer donations, which impacts their action with the taken from cards. So usually you combine an actant with a rebound, and that makes an instance of a rebound effect specific to your case. Then you have the impact cards, that aim to help consider the potential social environmental impacts of these indirect effects. So for each indirect effect, we try to understand the possible impacts on, for instance, education, climate change, and so on. For instance, producing more clothes has a lot of impacts, as I said, climate change, but also waste, pollution, land artificialization, and so on. And then this is only for the quick workshop. We propose to consider the likelihood and the seriousness of rebound effects as a result of their potential impacts. So we have some cards to help thinking about the risk associated with those indirect effects. And only for the quick workshops, we suggest that people use a risk matrix to evaluate, to assess the seriousness and the likelihood of each indirect effects. And depending on where it's located on the matrix, reflecting on if we should accept those risks or redesign or maybe trying to mitigate the risk of rebounds. And then the green and last cards are about mitigation. So they suggest ideas for fighting the rebound effects. And they also give concrete ideas for mitigation strategies. So as I said, for instance, the fishbowl or different kind of strategies that can be short-term to long-term. And it's a bit based on the leverage points from Donella Meadows of places to intervene in a system. Then they try to think about different mitigation strategies for each rebound effects. So now, how did I proceed to develop this systemic modeling methodology as a whole, and these prototype tools? Sorry. So I developed the methodology through and thanks to case studies that are represented in green. I presented you the Vinted case study. And it allowed me to carry out what we call formative evaluation. That is to say, to iteratively improve the methodological prototypes that are represented in orange here. So I don't have time to go into detail about all the case studies, but let's say that there were 4 sub-versions of the methodology based on 3 main case studies. And during these case studies, my observation and the feedback from the participants led me to conclude that collective modeling was perceived as very useful, especially for making things tangible and shifting towards concrete actions. Also, stakeholders very greatly appreciated being involved in the modeling. And some of them told me that they had learned more from the process of modeling than from the simulation results. And having been involved, they were very aware of the uncertainties of the model, which is a very good thing because it's essential to avoid using a model outside of its scope. And they did not see, in fact, the model, both qualitative and quantitative model, as something that would provide them with results, but more as a tool to support reflection and discussion. And now, among the main contribution of these theses are obviously the systemic modeling methodology and the associated tool, which are freely available online and which have been already used in public, private, and academic projects, as well as for education in engineering and soon in design, and also for awareness raising among citizens. So more generally speaking, this thesis has made it possible to identify a number of challenges in environmental decision-making, such as dealing with uncertainty and complexity, and to propose a recommendation for each challenge based on systemic approach and systemic design. Another contribution is to establish the fact that rebound effects are systemic in nature. So during an interview with a systemic designer, he told me that rebound effect can be seen as a reaction of a socio-technical system resisting a change that we are trying to apply. And in fact, the approach of systemic designers often consists of observing a complex situation in the present and searching for its root cause or root causes in the past. And in fact, we can see rebound effects as the complex situation in the future caused by the intervention that we are making today. So yes, ultimately, this thesis has shown that taking rebound effects into account is a concrete systemic approach to sustainability. So it's certainly not the only one, but it appeared to be a good way to think about all the dimensions of sustainability through a concept that is concrete and relatively simple to explain. And now I won't go into too much detail, but those are my research perspectives, but I'm running out of time. So now I would like to, in my thesis, I realized the importance of scenarios for multi-criteria decision-making and for managing complexity. Because yes, they make it easier to deal with complexity and to understand future alternatives in very concrete terms. And in the thesis, it was the scenarios were focusing on the product or service and it's the related socio-technical system. But I also realized the importance of prospective scenarios on a societal scale to inform public debate and societal choices. So yeah, I think it's a critical tool for collective decision-making on a societal scale. And that's why I'm going to study the IPCC scenarios as part of a two-year postdoc position funded by PEPR Ensemble. So that's it. Thank you for listening, and thank you in advance for your questions.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting presentation and also a very scary one, I would say. Somehow the level of complexity is just like increasing. So just like having a sustainable design in mind doesn't mean that you will have a sustainable effect at the end. And yeah, I mean, like for me, like directly also like a question, like how much can we really like control, like regarding the behavior of the consumers? How much should we control versus trusting consumers to have a conscious, sustainable behavior?
Yeah. So there is there is a working group or a project, yes, in Copenhagen about rebound effects that is called Reboundless, and they have a quite good framework for describing rebound effects, and they say that there is this environmental context, for instance, a capitalistic system, and there is a trigger that will lead both to rebounds. You as a designer or as a decision maker, you are more responsible, I guess, for the trigger, for not giving triggers for rebound effects. But then you are not responsible for the way people will react to a given intervention or digital solution and so on. In your role as a designer or decision maker, but then in your role as a citizen, you can the way you vote or the way you are talking with people, you can act on the environment. So yeah, I think that one interesting thing is to consider that everyone is responsible at different levels. And also, for instance, there is sometimes in so I talked to you about the consequential approach and the classical attributional approach sometimes aim to yes, attribute some impacts to specific people, and so it will be like 50% to the producer and then 50% to someone else in the value chain. In the consequential approach, what is interesting, I think, is that you can make people 100% of everything. Like if there is a sale that is not sustainable, the producer of the item, the platform, and the consumer are all 100% responsible, in my opinion. And you can the consequential approach allows for that.
Yeah, good points. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you, Laetitia, for.
Maybe,
Yeah.
can I have a comment?
Of course,
That's
yeah.
a friend me from Dassault System. Yeah, in fact, thank you very much for your presentation. In fact, so you are speaking about, system thinking and system engineering. Okay, just to say that in Dassault System, we have such teams. We have a team doing design thinking. So the department is called Design Studio. And I've worked with this team to build, some common approach for designing system, combining system thinking and system engineering. So I think we should exchange with this team to maybe exchange ideas. And I really like your, your impact graph on the rebound analysis. Because, when you are designing what you call system of systems, we, in fact, in the method, so we use some enterprise architecture framework, and we use model-based system engineering techniques. And basically, when we think about operations, we think about what we call the operational performers, is the abstract entity that we perform operational activities. And so I think it could be interesting to see how can we use your rebound graph to maybe try to make an additional view of that and to try really to do some impact analysis, and maybe do some simulation also.
Yes, in fact, I forgot to mention, but so my thesis was located in two labs. One was HCI, so human-computer interaction, and my other supervisor was at Isae Super-Héros in the systems engineering department. And in fact, it could be another view of another kind of representation of the system as the other views that you can have in model-based systems engineering. That's true.
Because, for example, when we work with the design studio team in Dassault System, we try to say, okay, the design thinking is quite a divergent approach. You try to think very large and to get ideas, but with the system engineering, it's a convergent approach. So you refocus on the topics, and it was a series of things like that. And at the end, you can really try to articulate a good product with this kind of approach.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Alain.
Yes, maybe a question more on the detail. One of the tools you developed was a quantitative modeling or simulation, and it makes me a little afraid because, as you said, considering the complexity and the human with human inside behavior, it's very difficult to say you have a precise quantitative modeling. So I was very happy that the users, the guys in your group, they were more happy to discuss about the model rather than to use the results of the model. But do you see there is one way to use sort of in a robust way the results, or is it only to make emerging the ideas and then the results are not useful at all? Or because it's difficult to say even the order of magnitudes, because considering it's very non-linear, it can be sometimes misleading. See what I mean?
Yes, yes. So this kind of models, it's used for short and mid-term, I would say, decisions. So if you have a strategy that have different levels, for instance, switching the paradigm and for the case of Vinted, enabling people to exchange clothes instead of selling clothes, you won't never be able to model that. This is really for understanding the magnitudes and for driving the short and midterm decisions, but it relies on huge for this case, the value study, the value report. So we've, I think, more than 300,000 respondents, participants of the study. And it's just to see, okay, for instance, it's very helpful to understand that. So I could even maybe share directly the tool itself, but yeah, that's helpful to see that. For instance, you have 30% of the people who say that they actually replaced brand new clothes by second-hand clothes. But if you see that you have 30% of people who made impulsive buying, and then you know the average number percentage of second-hand clothes and of new clothes, so you can have like, it helps to see in fact the most powerful leverage points. In the case of Vinted, that was very helpful. And for instance, I had workshops with designers, and they would say, oh, regarding the impact on charities, we could like give a given percentage of the profit of Vinted to charities, or we could redirect people to donate their clothes instead of selling in specific cases, like they are in the platform for more than 2 weeks, or they have already sold quite a good amount of clothes in the year or months. And we tried that, and it's like obvious, but obviously it was much more powerful to redirect people to give the full clothes to a charity, instead of giving a small percentage of the profit, which is a small percentage of the sale. But it's like you have this representation that help trying several different and combining several different strategies at the same time. So that in this case, with this huge study on an existing, well, it's a midway study, because Vinted already exists. So we can ask questions to people. They will have bias when they answer. There is uncertainty, but less than when you do prospective study. So when I did a prospective study with political actors in southwest of France about an electric train that would use abandoned rails, we talked about the impact on mobility and also on real estate and on employment and so on. And I had to make a study myself, because there was no survey about it. And it was a prospective survey asking people, what would you do if there was this line at this point with these hours and so on? And this is very biased, because it's even more difficult for people to answer the question, what would you do if there is something in the future, that if something didn't exist or something like that. And so in this case study, people said, okay, we learned a lot about the process of producing the model. We don't learn a lot about the result of the simulation. The only thing they really learned with the result of the simulation is the fact that the tourism in the area won't have any important effect, like the magnitude was really low. But apart from that, this model, it was, yeah, the very more a tool for discussion and for reflection and for making this process. But yes, so it depends on the case studies.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I didn't say thank you for the presentation and congratulations for your new position at IPCC.
Thank you. It's not at IPCC, but I will be studying the IPCC scenarios. But from Toulouse, it was something that I wanted to stay in Toulouse.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have maybe like, I don't know if I missed the definition, but maybe to both of you, like Ankita and Laetitia, how would you define rebound effects?
So yeah, I let you take this one.
Yeah, I would again go by the research group, the Reboundless, who I've collaborated with in Denmark, and they've really looked into what it means, because if you start to use it generally, then everything is a rebound effect. Because anything that's an unintended consequence. So the way they describe it, and this is purely for obviously quantitative purposes, and when you are trying to measure things to make this delineation, but a rebound effect is more a systemic response that occurs due to an action, versus unintended consequences are just something you mistook. So to give an example, if there is let's say a resale platform, and the idea behind creating a resale platform from like selling new goods to customers was to reduce environmental impact, but there is higher impact from transport, from washing of the clothes if you're doing like a rental service, then that isn't a rebound effect, because that is an inherent part of a rental type of business model, because that is just inherently part of that business model. But a rebound effect would be more if customers are saving money, and then that is causing them to buy more, to spend more, or from the perspective of the business, if it's causing you to increase your inventory more than you had, and then there's an effect. So that is the difference from a quantitative technical perspective, but it is of course used in a more general sense, I think, within companies and consultancies to refer to the first part.
Yes, if I can complete, I would say that there is no common definition of rebound effects through the different communities. You can see that an intervention will have some effects. Some are direct, some are triggers, and through a rebound mechanism will lead to indirect effects. Or sorry, yes, a trigger can lead to direct or indirect effects. So yeah, I'm making more confusion here, but just to say that it depends on the community. Sometimes it's defined as unwanted counter effects or diminishing an initial positive effect. I think it's out of date definition. Sorry for Vlad Korama, because we can't know what Vinted wants or doesn't want. Like the initial intention is not always very clear, and also it's not only diminishing an initial beneficial effect, because at least in HCI we talk about structural rebounds, or even in sustainable ICT, macroeconomic rebound or transformational rebound. So I mean, we can't say, oh, it's saving CO2, and now we are producing more CO2, because there are lots of more different kinds of impacts. So that's why for me, I used my specific own definition was indirect effects due to a change in behavior or practice that may result in detrimental social environmental impacts. And this was because I wanted to talk with professional designers, engineers, so practitioners, and they don't care about a rigorous definition, but we wanted to, I wanted to include all the possible indirect effects that would be of interest. And yeah, it could have been indirect effects that could have detrimental social environmental impact, but rebound effect is a shorter term, and it's easier to catch the attention of a practitioner with this term, this concept. Yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience?
So is a rebound effect always something negative?
No, it can also be positive. You can also have positive reinforcing mechanisms. An example is in the case of, I think there was a study that did this on the transportation sector. So when there is access to more car sharing services or a bus service, it's used more by people, and then obviously the emissions overall go up, but then you must kind of balance that out with what does that mean in terms of access to the community, mobility for a community that might not have had access before. Was it a marginalized community that now actually has access to transport? So it's a little bit of a balance, and in that study they found that it had an overall positive effect on the life style and dignity of living ways of this community, and then that's a positive rebound. So then they just have to be balanced. It depends on how you measure and where you draw your boundaries.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why the definition is a problem, I think, because yeah, in fact, if more people use bikes, then maybe bikes are cheaper, and more people use bikes, and it's a reinforcing effect that is positive, but then is it a rebound effect? So yes, I think it's not an easy definition, and I think also that even if the reinforcing mechanisms can have positive impacts, now with the twin transition narrative about, for instance, in the digital sector, making positive indirect effects in other sectors, I think it's important because usually the practitioners, they are very focusing on the possible positive indirect effects. So I'm going to do that so that people will buy second-hand clothes instead of new ones. Then it's important to make them focus also on the negative, the detrimental indirect effects. But yeah, the mechanism itself, it could be positive or negative. And positive and negative is also just a point of view. So it's positive for the company to have more clients. Is it positive for the environment? Not sure. So yes.
Thank you. Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Laetita and Ankita, for your very, very interesting thoughts. And I only have an additional thought. I was last week on an event with Damien Lutz. He is a creator of life center design, and his and the other people there, our conclusion was to especially the UX professionals, to create towards a more sustainable aspect of our work is to think we are in a marathon and not in a sprint to change things, and we have to think about that. We can change, but we need our energy, and can't think of fast solutions. So, and yes, that it's also for the UX designers the term, not a term to say we are responsible for global trade, because we made the sale of products very usable and very barrier free for everyone. And now we have a global trade and fast fashion, and how we can change it again, so that we made it the global trade kind of not sustainable. So yeah, that's our responsibility, the digital world, and that's also an example for rebound effect, I think, from local to global with all its effects. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have another question to Ankita. So at the beginning, you mentioned that business models either like slow the flow, slow, close, narrow, or regenerate flows. Can you maybe explain that?
Yeah, it was specifically about circular business models. So it's this overarching definition that is widely accepted in the community of, because there's many strategies and many different archetypes of what a circular business model can be. And what I mean by that is they can slow through a circular business model, you can slow resource flow. So by creating service-based business models, for example, that slow the amount of times product or are used, and you can close those resource loops through recycling, refurbishing, remanufacturing, narrowing resource loops through using less materials in creating the product, seeing what are unnecessary waste or not necessary packaging, for example, and reducing the amount of materials that go into these resource flows, and regeneration, which is quite new, I think, but it's also something that's quite needed because of the state of the planet. I don't think it's enough to just say we now live in a circular system and we just create repair, recycle, and these strategies. We need to regenerate natural spaces, places where there's been excessive resource extraction, and sort of replenish some of those resources in whatever ways is still possible. So that can be through sourcing materials that are grown regeneratively, that restore soil or restore communities that grow them, or it could be using seaweed. A lot of companies do this. If you do it in the right way, then you de-acidify the oceans, you increase biodiversity in the area because the seaweed creates habitat for those areas. So that's what I mean by that.
Thank you. Yeah, Jackstein is back. I found one point that was very interesting from Laetitia, like to think about rebound effects from a risk management perspective. And Jackstein is from the Risk Management Working Group. He's also been active in the development of the ISO standard on risk management, if I'm not wrong. And I think it will be like interesting to look at the topic of rebound effects and risk management within our sustainability working group. Jackstein, maybe you have some words on this?
That's correct. Yeah, so happy to engage and participate, and not much more I can say at this point, other than we are on board and would like to join in.
Cool, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions from the audience? I can jump to the next one. If I don't know, if I don't know, Laetitia and Ankita, if you have to go or something like that.
No, that's okay for me.
Yeah, for me until 6:30. That's what.
Okay, yeah, we can do till 6:30, and then yeah.
So I just have more of a comment, and I'm glad that you made the connection with risk management, because I saw that too, and I thought that was really great. And that we have Jack Stein on the call as well at the same time is fantastic. first of all, thanks again. I thought it was really inspiring, the work both of you shared with us today. I was also, when you were talking, Laetita, and I heard that from somewhere else as well, and after this sort of discussion around the definition of rebound, a couple of things came to my mind. One is the link with respect to what we've also discussed with the flourishing business calendars around this sort of mid, short term and near term, and then sort of we have a model we use where we talk about horizon or triple horizon on horizon 3, and in a way the rebound usually in the negative effect you described comes to what we call the horizon 2 minus, is we aspire maybe not far enough. And I think the discussion with the human messiness, which was underlying here as well, flows into that. So what are we? I mean, we definitely cannot push a button to have us all evolve our behaviors and our mental models with respect to how we consume. And most of these unintended consequences are beyond us, as we just said, and Ala pointed that out too. So I find that this thinking horizon 2 minus, when we're sort of pushed back into the systems which remain unsustainable, is, this inertia there, and how we could maybe propel us beyond that. So was very made clear to us today, I guess, with your presentations and the task ahead of us with respect to that. So I find it really informative to see how your modeling approach was educative, more than outcome-based, is what I'm trying to say. And I take that with me as a notion and a lesson forward. And I really would like to say that the sharing here was really fantastic with respect to that. And what came to my mind is a term you used, which was, I heard somewhere, which was called protopian. And I seem to hear it with what you were saying there as well, right? That somehow we need to go beyond this to get maybe to the positive rebound effects. And I'm stopping here because I'm rambling on, but I just thought it was really inspiring. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Kai. Maybe just I would like to do like a short recap. So from your both approaches, I would assume that it makes sense to address a rebound effect at the beginning, like when you develop the business model. So for example, there is the Miro board from Ankita that you can use to develop the business model. And when you have the business model, then you can build a causal loop diagram to understand the interconnectedness between the different variables in your system and try to eliminate the triggers for rebound effects. Would this be a correct approach for this topic?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary.
Okay, very good. Good. Yeah, as I've mentioned, I have 1,000 more questions, but I think we will never finish if we go through this. Yeah, maybe I would like to. So, as this is the first episode, we will have also many people coming to present, and we also, as I've mentioned, we have this Sustainable Together project, where it's an open source project where voluntary people come and we work together on transforming a conventional business model, enterprise, and products into sustainable ones. And yeah, so we have different communities that are coming together, and we like to expand and bring different expertise. So if you also would like to take part of it, you can drop me a message and I can add you to the mailing list. It's you do as much as you can. There is no no obligations or something like that. So yeah, if you have something on that, you can just let me know. Otherwise, we will definitely use your tools, and I would be happy if we could stay in touch. Definitely, we will, I think, come back to you with questions or something like that. Yeah, and maybe you have something you wanted to say something, Ankita?
No, just thank you for inviting, and yeah, can definitely stay in touch.
Cool. Yeah, I would suggest some applause for Ankita and Laetitia. And thank you very much. This was very incredible first episode. Looking forward to the upcoming ones. And yeah, I think we will definitely be working more closely together we'll get in touch, maybe develop some new concepts, publish a paper or something like that. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to Kai and Alan for organizing this great presentation, and hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Yeah, goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.